Hello, everyone. I'm Anshita B. Nair, co-founder and COO of Culture. In today's digital age, it is essential to ensure that your online content is accessible and inclusive to all. In this workshop today, you will learn about the different areas of digital world that require attention, including various resources to make the transition, how to word your content inclusively and managing your digital footprint. We have with us Siddhantt Shah, who will walk you through the steps that you have to take to make your museums accessible digitally. Architect Siddhantt Shah is an accessibility expert and founder of Access for All, an organization that aims at creating inclusive cultural experiences for all. He is featured by National Geographic as Changemaker 2022. He is the youngest recipient of the National Award Mphasis Universal Design Award 2017 by the National Committee on Rights for People with Disabilities. Along with his global consultation practice, he is currently the Access Consultant to British Council India and for the Pradhanmantri Sangrahalaya Government of India. Shah was awarded a position to represent India at the British Museum International Program as well. Welcome, Siddhantt. Always good to have you with us.
Thank you.
That you agreed to do this workshop under Museum Week. We've had a series of activities, and this is one of the most required and the most interesting topics that I think we were able to sort of curate. So I'm quite looking forward to this workshop.
Thank you so much for this. So I think while it's a small group and we also have participants joining on Facebook and other places, if people want to switch on their videos, you can have a short round of introduction. Any particular museum, or if you want to put in the chat like which museum you all are from, so it would be interesting for us also to bring in some examples and also take your questions towards the end of it. So the presentation would be for first 30 minutes. Post that we would have a 15-20 minutes for question and answers. Or if you have anything while I'm presenting also, please feel free to put in the chat. But otherwise, if anybody wants to unmute and talk, or you want to put in the chat, happy to wait for the link.
I think it's very difficult to get people to switch on their videos these days.
Okay. I teach also, so trust me, I know that. Yeah. If you want to just put in the chat which museum you all are from, or if you are associated with any particular museum, that would also help us, but no pressure.
I think a lot of people who have been participating in Museum Week are people who want to become museum professionals, who are young professionals, who are students. And so I think, this is something that a lot of people, young professionals who are going into museums might be attending. So
please, if you have any particular questions around that as well, I'm happy to answer that. So I think, can you see me? Yeah. You will have to allow screen share from.
Done.
Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Is the full screen version of this available?
Not yet. Yeah, now it is.
Okay, fantastic. So as the name suggests, it's literally about going mad, and the name came through because it has a small pre-story to it. Around COVID, in those 3 years of COVID, Access for All was at a point where we thought that we really won't be able to survive, and we won't be able to look at accessibility work, because primary work that we dealt with was bringing people together in the museum, and also creating tactile artworks, creating things that they could touch, feel, and largely looking at physical accessibility, which suddenly became a taboo at those points in time. And it was only at that one junction when we were discussing, I was discussing with a friend and a museum curator, and she literally said, "Dan, go mad, think about different ideas that you could do." And that's literally where this acronym suddenly popped up about like, how can we also look at digital accessibility? Because post-COVID, suddenly the phygital world, like the physical and digital world is literally, is like, it's become one, like there is no change in that. And it becomes mandatory to also look at how do you tap into the digital space that is available out there and make it accessible, because even before you step your foot in the museum, you will first look at its website or various other elements. And that question actually started with that. And I was discussing with someone and they asked me this question about how many museums in India are digitally accessible. And this question really started a discussion about like, what does one even mean by digital accessibility, in what aspect, right? And digital accessibility talks about multiple things. It talks about the areas in which you want to look at. So it means their social media and website. And then the question that came to me was that, are there any other aspects of digital access too? And that's where we started talking about the other various facets to it, right? It's social media, looking at blogs, looking at the digital interface that the museum has, the YouTube channels, their digital hardware also. Like we have touch screens. There were a lot of other mediums and elements that were created that are used in that space. So how does one utilize those resources? And that's the larger understanding of it. So there are 7 key principles of universal design that we particularly follow when we are looking at the elements of inclusion and access. One is creating an equitable use. The whole idea of equitable use is giving people what they want. And this is individualized. This is also looking at one-on-one understanding of the needs of a person and their diverse abilities that they have. Then also being flexible in use and being able to do different things. So I wanted to give you a very simple example while we are here on Zoom, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. So all those who are using Zoom on their system, you on your top left corner, you would see a green shield over there. So if you were to click on that green shield, it opens a tab, and on the right hand side, you will see a small gear icon that's there, which is like a settings icon. And if you click on that, it opens a tab that talks about accessibility features. And if you click on the accessibility feature tab over here, it will give you a list of different things that you can activate on your screen in order to utilize the elements of access while we're talking. So now you are in the control of the captions or the elements that are there. You're not dependent on others to decide the size of captions that you want or which screen you would want to wear. Like one of the reasons why online social media, online platforms like Zoom and all really picked up, particularly during COVID, is because it looked at the elements of adjusting it as per the needs of the person. And suddenly everybody became the front facing audience, making it easy for those who would lip read, who required sign language while multiple people were talking. So in this way, it became a medium of actually reaching out to various other groups of people. So this is just one of the examples to understand how the elements can be made accessible and inclusive for all. The third important point is that you need to keep it simple and intuitive. Like one needs to understand how to use the space. If the arrow shows like it's a downward arrow, then there should be information. There should not be misleading information, and hence perceptible information that irrespective, like even if you put an icon, non-verbal elements become extremely important, and they need to have a certain meaning which can be deciphered by a wider group of people. Particularly zero tolerance for error, because it can affect someone. Like one of the classic example here is the digital safety when you are using any fintech software, right? Any financial software, when you're making a transaction, you would have elements that you are concerned with, and low tech, low resource physical efforts where you don't have to really change, you don't have to move your thumb, because the entire dexterity of using that space is by looking at the thumb, or like even if you are using it on your laptop or system, by you don't have to move or you don't have to use multiple things. And lastly, the size and the space for the approach in use. This feeds into the space of digital largely because it also looks at where is your digital element placed in a setting. So if you go to the National Museum, they have different areas with digital accessibility facilities or digital screens that are there. Now, it becomes important to understand at what height is it being located or at what point is it being placed or what is the angle of repose so that you are able to touch and utilize the entire screen. So these are some of the key principles of universal designs along which we look at any format of accessibility and inclusion. This was just, I thought like we are here for a good 30, 40 minutes and it would be interesting to understand like one element of it. And then I would also bring in some certain elements that can be used as a checklist. And following this, we have devised an entire checklist, which we are happy to share. You can reach out to us and we are more than happy to send it across and discuss on that. But the idea is that how do you make it easier? How do you bring in the ease factor when somebody is using the content? So one of the most important thing is to understand what are the levels of color contrast or the text that you are using. Also the captioning that goes along with the video, right? So right now, as I showed you, even if you want, you can bring in your own auto captioning with the element over here with this particular video. And if we had to take that to another level, we could have also had somebody who's transcribing the information as in how I speak in the chat box so that you also get a live feed of written information. So it's always about like accessibility is an incremental process. It has to happen step by step. That is how it grows from there. And other elements, right, like providing time-based media, that there are elements that only stay on your homepage for a couple of seconds and then move out. How do you kind of control that, and how do you make sure that it allows the person to move the image as and when they want to do it? This is an extremely important element about color contrast that please look at the two elements that are there. One where you have a background that's darker and the text that's light, versus when you have the background lighter and the text that is dark and clear in terms of writing. This is typically a chart that we follow for foreground background understanding of the color and understanding what works, what doesn't work. While this is important, it is also important to work on this along with the designer, because there is always this game about like, should it be aesthetically appealing or should it be accessible? Because accessibility and aesthetics can go together. Like, it is not that they can't go together. And there are ways, and you have enough resource and content to play around with and utilize it. The second part is, how do you create an operable interaction where you can only use your keyboard, like you use the tab key. So for a person who is using a software that allows them from whatever is there on the screen, like the text to speech software, they also use the tab key. And if there is information across multiple spaces, it will be extremely difficult for them to even understand and comprehend their information. And hence, navigation on the page ideally should be left to right or top to bottom, utilizing all that space that you have on the screen. So the third one was also the content that goes in. So while we are talking about the design that happens, one of the biggest thing that I have seen, particularly with the museums, is that the content that is written, it is written as if like one professor or like one academic person from the field, from who only knows technical information about the particular element of the museum, is writing for other person. It's like the people in between that spectrum have to decode the information that is written, right? Like even a simple word like verso, like, and there was an image description of an artwork and it was written the painting comma verso. Like, it is so difficult for people to even understand that the meaning of the word verso is that it's just the rear side of the artwork. So why not write also in an inclusive way so that people feel comfortable? Another thing that is changing across the globe, and we are also trying to work around with the museums over here, is to look at their captions and the content that they're writing through the lens of the gender. Is the content gender balanced, or like, are we, because we have a very typical stand of like writing certain things. It's a very typical gaze through which we look at an object, and these elements do become important while you are looking at digital accessibility. Of course, the content that goes needs to have a robust structure of different assistive technologies that you're using. A lot of museums currently, with the boom in the AI domain, like there's so much information that is coming up, right? That you can derive information. There are these plugins of chatbots and all, but do they really give you the right level of understanding, right? Like, so just giving you one example of, there was one of the plugins on one of the websites that we recently audited of a museum in India, and it had auto translation. So while they did mention that they had a dog-legged staircase in one of the atriums, it suddenly became in Hindi, like if somebody wanted to use that information, it became Kutta per mode CDI hai. So you need to also understand that that information that comes across can change the meaning, and it literally gets lost in translation, because while they are important elements, but they may not feed into what you are trying to convey. So how do you manage that and create a system that allows that? So as I'm building on the skeleton and various other elements that become a part of it. How, and while you're creating that, there again another website that we audited and we were looking at, and this was in Jaipur, and while we are doing this particular website, constantly there was this word that said places to see, things to see over there, and the content that was being written for the website being rewritten for a person with visual impairment. And while we were doing this, like at Access for All, like we have a core team of 5 individuals and all with diverse abilities. And the person who was auditing this this website said that everywhere, like while I read the content, it is clear for me, but it is every time telling me, as you can see there, and as you move around, you would see this over there. So for a person who's blind, like that constant reminder of, I can't see this, right? And so how do you change? Like it's a simple change of the word. So the tab was changed from see to explore, and we changed the language in which it was written. Hence, it becomes really important to also bring in the community while you are designing, or while you have the chance of changing certain things, get it reviewed and vet by the community so that they can give you a direct feedback as to what is being done or how it is being utilized and not. So one of the most important things that we have followed in our work for last couple of years is that nothing for them without them, like, and making sure that they are part of each and every decision making process, so that when things are created, it is available in an inclusive format. And it is not only when it is done, then you hand it over to the community and then let them decide whether it works or not. So these are certain important things. And considering accessibility in the first part, like most of the time we consider accessibility as a retrofit. कि पहले हम design बना देते हैं, then we consider accessibility. If you consider accessibility inclusion while you are designing your website, it won't be an add-on cost. It won't be an add-on element that you would have to do. It only becomes an add-on cost when you retrofit that. So while you are giving a design brief, or if you are a designer yourself, consider these as important checklist and benchmark them against that while you are working on it, so that you are able to deliver a project that does not only cater to a particular group of audiences, but also has a reach to wider groups of persons with diverse abilities, which may not be able to physically go to the museum, but their digital experience would be the only thing that they can utilize it. So how do you bring in those experiences also together in that space becomes important. So if you're designing something for, say, for learning disability particularly, there are simple things that you can do, like the use of bright colors, right? Do not write text as only bullets, right? Like create content walls, as I said, go left to right, top to bottom, so that it becomes easy for them to comprehend information. Also, like give instructions, like don't make your buttons very vague, like particularly over here, right? Like when you make that, when you click there, what is it that they are going to see, but they won't know what is happening over here, right? you will have to realize that you will have to give instructional information. There is a difference between designing for intuition and designing for instruction. Largely, when you are designing for instruction, it gives people a clear idea of like what will happen if I do this. So if I click on this button, I can attach files. And when I just say click here, I don't know what else would open up on that space. The seventh point, looking at the standard and the quality of the content that you put in, it will it's like, ramp can be accessed by everyone versus a flight of staircase. So literally, if you're able to make content accessible and inclusive, a wider group of people would be able to utilize it, will be able to work on that and access it, and it becomes a win-win for everyone. It becomes an easier thing for the person using it, and also their caregivers that are around them, because they are also trying to figure out deriving information, be it parents, be it caregivers, who are working with the individuals to allow them and assist them in their day-to-day living. And as I said in the beginning, today websites and social media has become the first most important point of like touch. It's like even before you go to a museum, you're going to look at their website, or any place for that matter, right? There are multiple things that are going on in that spot. And while moving, while coming to that space, it should not be that when they come there, they know that this is not available. So one of the things that we do tell all the museums to do is that on your homepage, put down things even if they are not there, because that is more important to know. That it is not important for me only to know whether you have a toilet or you have a lift, but what are the other things that you don't have, so that I can plan my activity around that space and I can move around in that point, and like it can be done like with various different things. Even on your social media, one of the highlight features could be your accessibility highlight features. That it could also look at a range of users. It is not only for persons with disability. It can also be for those with age related challenges, or working with children, or various other requirements that are there. And when you look at the physical accessibility, your digital elements need to also give information in a certain structured manner. That, if there is a major challenge with dexterity, so everybody's use of mouse or the keypad would change. So if you want them to like have a certain precision for clicking, it should not only be that point, but it should be that at least some area around that space, it needs to become like a button for them to understand that information. Or like even allowing that the use of keyboard while they are using it, the tab key function becomes extremely important. And another challenge that we have seen, and these are all practical examples, is that some of the websites are compatible only for a laptop, but when you use them on the phone, the wireframe changes and the UI and the UX of the same website doesn't appeal the user, because it was only designed for a desktop setting. So if you're designing, and now of course there are various different available no code or even low code softwares that are available that will give you that the level of setup, and one can make it accessible for a wider group of people. Also, representation matters. Like I always find this particular university's brochures very interesting, because one, that this university does work and provide multiple elements for like persons with diverse abilities across the globe. But if you are accessible, if you want people to know that you have a space, it's not always also about like just putting a picture of a ramp or like your braille signage or something, right? But like put images of others, or like put content where you see others. It could be a testimonial. It could also be different things where people see themselves over there, like, and hence they would like to come in, right? It could also be like, it could be like a group of people talking in Hindi or like your other language, that the regional language that is there. Like, so when a wider group of people from the community want to come there, they feel comfortable that yes, this is also a space for us, because largely the museum feels like a very elite space, that a certain group of people can go. Or this was one thing, one of the I did some audience research in Jaipur, and we asked them that, tune up, like, why don't you go to the museum? And this was one of the discussions that we were having there. And very clearly, one thing that came out was that we don't know if we can go there, like I am not that literate enough to go there in the museum, or like I think my children can go there, they will enjoy more, but I won't be able to tell them more. So that also talks about how you bring in the content, your interpretation elements that are there. And today social media can play a huge role in that, like, and can help you create those information that can be shared to people. And this is a simple thing. This is a very technical element that talks about your content hierarchy. So say, for example, if you're putting the sequence of headings, your sequence of information, or like even if you want them to lead somewhere, then it needs to be there it needs to be set up in a clear manner. Like it can't be that if I want information about, say, for example, I want an information about a particular material, then have a material segregation tab. Like if your object has that level of diverse collections, or if your object is around a particular thing, like, if it is around, say it's a numismatic collection, then there would be a difference of like how you would segregate information in the hierarchy. So it could be in a linear setting of time periods or materials or various ways, but don't confuse people when they come to your site. Like there needs to be clear information that's is stated for them. And lastly, the content should not be misleading. Like it should tell you what it is, right? Like it needs to convey what the elements are, right? And there are various ways of doing it. So as you can see this, we have a veg and a non-veg sign, right? Like, but what happens to those who are colorblind? Like today, it becomes extremely difficult for a person to comprehend this, right? Like whether which is green or which is red, and how do I then understand? So if you are catering to a diverse audience, and use graphics in a manner that becomes important, right? And hence one of the things that is recently happening is that you would now see like non-vegetarian foods being associated with a triangle. So even for those who are colorblind, or those who are not able to understand between two colors, or they don't have the clarity of vision, can easily identify through the shape and know that these are two separate things. So these are examples of a day-to-day practice that can be brought into our museums, and we can learn to create content in this particular manner. And I just thought that it would be nice to have a small activity. I'm just going to stop this for a minute and again come back. I'll need everyone's. I will need everyone to just switch on their, like, use their Instagram, like, for this, if you can. So on Instagram or any of your social media, if you are uploading photographs, you would see that it now asks you for this particular thing called alt text. And alt text is, be it LinkedIn or even on Facebook. And it's a very simple method of making sure that you are able to put up content on your social media that can be utilized by the community or persons who are visually impaired, because it reads out that information to them. So if you go to any of your pictures on Instagram, like just click on the edit option, and then you will see those, like an option that says like edit text or add alt text. And as you go there, you can feed in the alt text, and alt text should not be more than 50 to 70 characters. And please remember, alt text is not a description. Sorry, it is not a caption of the image. It is a description of the image. Like it needs to talk about various elements that you see on my screen. So basically, you would see this, like if the picture was missing, then this is what you would also read. Like, so it's not only for the person with visual impairment, but also it gives information to everyone if the picture was not, if you're not able to load something. And it would say that tourist pose for a picture while touching the foot of the statue. So typically in the alt text, you write a descriptive writing. You put what you see. As I said, foreground and background are extremely important. So what do you see happening over there? You add the graphical description about what are the elements, what is happening, and if there is a particular action in that. So you add those elements. So for our purpose, I've put this one picture here, and I'll give you all 5 minutes for you to write a descriptive text for this, and you can put it in the chat so that everybody can see it. I'll give you the information once we are done. Like, but as of now, I just want you to comprehend the image as in how you feel or whatever you think that this image could be. So you have 5 minutes. It's exactly 4:30. Yeah, it's 4:30. You have 5 minutes, and please put the text in the chat if you can. It would be nice to hear from you. Okay, we'll wait for 2 more minutes and then I'll also put in my description, typically what we would put in for this. But it's really nice to see different things coming up. Okay, anybody else would like to add their thing? Okay, so this is typically what we would write. So while I think everyone got a fair deal of what they are trying to put in, and one of the most important thing is that when you're writing a descriptive text and also understanding the current developments that are going in the domain of inclusion towards gender identity, we do not assume. So we understand from the lens of unconscious bias that we do not assume anyone's gender and we associate a person as a person. Like, so we would not say a person who's young, who's old, a lady, or a girl. We won't say that. So we would use the word person. While also a lot of you have mentioned about Gandhiji, Mahatma Gandhi statue using that. So while I'm doing that, and I know that this is going to be used by a audience who is visually impaired, we want to also create tactile elements over there, right? So we want to talk about the available element of a tactile statue. So you do bring in the word, and you also give, because here when you say the statue of Mahatma Gandhi, you need to also set in a reference of what is the size. Is it a life-size statue of Mahatma Gandhi or is it a palm-size statue? So you give is a indicator. It may not be an exact size, but you give, is it like as big as your palm, as big as, twice the size. So you give certain associative understanding of that particular object, and you also give the action that that object is in. Like, so the Gandhi statue is sitting and spinning charka on the spinning cotton on the charka. So that's how you would do. And then also utilizing this to talk about, so I have particularly not put in braille over here because as I know that the person is of course touching and reading braille, but I have not put the word braille over here because while the person comes in, like, there could be a question on that about like what is being there or is there any other information. So you also want to limit the information to a certain amount where like there are no other questions that come up on those aspects, because while this is an image, you want to give the description of the image, not the information that is being put in over there in the image. So that is a very important element. So on that note, and thank you so much everyone for sharing it. So these are just simple things that you can consider about, like, when you're using and when you're putting content, like about, of course, describe the image, literally what you did, like the alt text that's there, like using simple colors, making sure that the buttons are descriptive, giving information about like the line and sentence and like everything falling together. And lastly, if you want to put in a link or a heading, or you want them to reach out to you, mention that very specifically so that if they click over there, they get the right information that you are asking for. So yeah, and like that, we also have an entire checklist. So what you saw was, of course, a brief understanding of that. we've created a descriptive checklist of how to also perceive information and check based on that. So if anybody is interested, you can scan our QR code or like, just drop us a message on our website, or even like you can reach out to us on our email or just call us. We'll be happy to send information and discuss. If you have any further queries or questions on that, more than happy to assist you with it. So thank you. Can I stop sharing my screen? We can take questions. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Siddhantt. That was a really good introduction to what people can do, especially museums with their digital websites and social media. What I want to ask you is, how many museums have started adopting this in India? Like, how many museums or cultural organizations, even on their social media, provide all text? Is this a practice which has caught on, or is it catching on? I mean,
see, it's a practice that one of them. Okay, let me give you a pretext to this. In COVID, suddenly all the social media interns became extremely important in all the museums. Like suddenly that became a very important job role for museums, right? It was not only like a summer internship, but like people became like, oh, now you have to figure out, tell us the new ways of doing that. So what happens is that while the organization is keen on setting it up, it is very important for it to continue. So if you see a lot of organizations that started doing things during COVID have suddenly stopped being like active on social media, or like if they were to do something, they would consider these elements on that, right? So now, how do I also look at these key areas and elements to vet that, right? Like while we do an access audit, with physical access audit, it is good because we know that it is being created there. But the digital accessibility space, when it's done for the software, it is there. But this is a practice-based thing. So while there are museums that have started adopting it, but I would say it's like they do it, and in some cases it kind of fizzles out, right? Sadly, a lot of us also look at, like what we have come across is that people feel that, oh, this is a new thing, let's do it. Like, but it is a mandatory thing. Like today, nobody is governing you. That doesn't mean that it is not mandatory. Like under the RPWD Act, like, there are possibilities that an organization can get sued for not doing certain things and not providing the right information. So while of course in India the community doesn't go beyond, like, but like a very simple thing, like this is for everyone. Like just put, if you were to Google Tate Museum and Oliver Eliason exhibition, and just put what happened with that one. Out of all the artifacts that were accessible, only one artifact, one object was not accessible for a wheelchair user, and it suddenly took over like Instagram, in like everywhere, So it's not about like how much do you do, but even if you start doing smaller things, you need to continue doing that. You need to make sure that that stays there. Suddenly the website changes or the content changes, because museums also have this balance of a permanent and a temporary exhibition, right? So it needs to continue with that. Like I particularly feel, so one of the examples that I would like to give is Khoj also. Like, so we work with Khoj in Delhi, and the entire team, literally, we also did training with the content writing team about how would you write accessible content, right? Working with all the different stakeholders that were associated with the website so that it becomes an automated thing. And along with that, we also gave them like a resource kit and a toolkit that could be given to anybody who's joining in new, so that they continue with that. So while change is happening, while there are people who are looking at it, there are some who are doing it like bang on, like they're doing it, they'll make sure that it continues. In some, it kind of fizzles out, but it's organization to organization. Also, it's about the budget, right? That nahi, isme zyada budget lagega, isme kam lagega. So that balance of like kitna hona chahiye, itna nahi, kaise hoga.
Actually, that was another thing I wanted to ask you. Like, museums are already understaffed, right? Now, this becomes another thing for a content writer to do. So, are there specialists like you who museums can outsource this work to, where, on a daily basis, like, there are social media agencies, there are, agencies for everything. Are there organizations which can help museums,
Can't hear you.
no, I was saying, are there
Yeah.
organizations which can help museums do this, on a regular basis? Like, you can hire a social media agency to look at your social media content, but are there people that you can hire as consultants who will do this on a regular basis for museums? Like, can you outsource this?
Yeah, definitely. See, and not only working with the museum, but we have been working with various different agencies also who provide this facility to the museums, right? So, as you rightly said, a third party collaboration is something that is going on in museums, right? So for them also to work and create content. So, like us, what we also do is, while we are creating that, but we also have now dedicated staff that particularly focuses on putting information, right? So while we are the accessibility consultants with British Council for India UK season of culture, we also looked at providing information in different languages, also vetting translation part of it, like using regional language elements into the information that can go out with that. So while we are working with a team in Kolkata, the information, the posters and things that went out in multiple languages so that we could reach out to a wider group of audiences.
Right. I think there is a question. Can you elaborate on that bit about presenting content in regional languages on online platforms? Do you think that would limit the larger reach, considering that English has major reach?
So while we do talk, as I was just saying, right, that we are not saying that you put in only one language, right? Like, it's about putting the content, making sure that the content is available in multiple languages. So while you of course have English, and English has a reach, but it has a reach to a certain audience, right? So it's also important for the organization to decide who is the projected audience, while you are looking at, like, who is the group that you are targeting, who's the groups that you want to bring in, and hence you bring in those, you balance it out as per the needs. So while this is a recommendation, you utilize it as per what fits well with your organization.
Can you tell us some examples of Indian museums where you can see this? Like, if I wanted to go see a accessible website or an app, can you give me some, would you have?
So there used to be, like, we worked on Mumbai culture map with Godrej Culture Lab. So it was an entire map of Mumbai that would give you all locations of different cultural points, like giving you information about if you wanted to go to a theater, to an art gallery, to a museum, like in different spaces and points, giving you also information in that. And you could also change that information from English to Hindi and Marathi, like it would give you those 3 language options also. Or even if you, as I said, Poj is one interesting website where you can see different elements of accessibility considered. And while these elements are there, right, while we're talking about accessibility elements, it's also like it varies from organization to organization. There are certain things that they have picked up, right? So with Merangad, when we did, like, there are certain elements that are there, which are like the color contrast or the font contrast elements that have been brought into it. So you can find some of these over there. Even right now with the National Museum's website, right, there are certain accessibility indicators that have been brought in. So for their Anubhav gallery, which was the tactile art, the tactile gallery that was created in the National Museum, all the objects that were there, their information, the caption was available in text, in large font print. It was available in Hindi and English, and it was also available as a downloadable audio file. So now these are different elements that are there, like, and you won't find one museum that has done it all, but there are different museums who are trying and figuring out different elements in that space.
Yeah. So now there is this whole rush to be, digitally more accessible, in terms of for any audience, and that's where they're bringing in virtual museums. You have AR, VR elements. Do we have ways of making these also accessible? Are they already available, or this it's still sort of evolving?
So I would say that, like, say the AR VR, like, it also evolved in the gaming domain. Like it came up in that space first, and then it's been picked up by like the builders over here who are creating, like they don't need to create a model flat. They can just show it to you on your, you can walk around in that apartment wearing the VR glasses. So now those elements that are there, but those elements are largely being looked at as the hardware, and the hardware or the gaming console or the console to control these experiences are being designed in an accessible format. So while the content part is still coming up, it is catching up. There are fantastic games that are being designed, video games that are being designed to consider that there is also they're also bringing in representation within the game,
Right.
to bring in characters and groups like that to showcase about like what elements should be there.
That's right. I would invite people to put in their questions if they have any, but can you list some courses to upskill, such as for arts management, social media skills, etc., for jobs in culture sector?
Wow. That's
I
a
think
good question.
upskilling with
Upskilling, yeah. So
yeah.
there, particularly like if you're looking at an arts management profile, then there are multiple. Now there are also courses that happen like through MOOC, which is your online courses that are available, or even like Swavlamban, and there are various other entities that are being provided by the Indian government. And if you also want to specialize in something, right? If you there, so I recently came across a course that was looking at only gamification within the museum space, that trains you and teaches you in that domain of like how do you gamify and how do you create, just like using the museum content, how you're creating it. And it was a program that was largely on looking at Figma based softwares and other softwares to create those experiences. So I think there are multiple courses that are there, but also it is important to understand that which skill that you want to upgrade, right? Like which is the skill that you're looking for. Are you going to be providing those services as an individual, or you want to work with an organization that provides those services and you would like to work there to gain that experience? So depending on all these parameters, you can create a certain checklist of things for you and then find a course. But I think there are multiple, even if you don't want to go somewhere and do it, there are online courses that are there.
How did you sort of collect this information? Were there courses on digital accessibility which you took?
Yes, so I've taken, like, so while I was also in my master's program, we had an option for like taking different majors that were there. And one of the things that I had taken up was understanding digitech in the culture world. So my master's was in heritage management. So one of the things that we looked at was on digital inclusion. So while this is only one part of it, like digital accessibility goes in various domains. It also, so one of the research projects that we had picked up was on like how do you design the screen dexterity for those with who would want to control only with the retina movement, right? Like, so any screen that you see, right, that you would have, or a kiosk, a digital kiosk that you would have in a museum, which you would use a fingertip, how would somebody who, couldn't use their hands or like had to only operate it through the retinal movement? And so these are different courses that we took up, and like we were trained in those aspects, along with of course these basic understanding of like understanding the UI UX and working in that domain.
Right. That's really good. I hope there are courses like this in India, in all the museology, courses.
Yeah.
So
I think the museology courses in India really need to shake up and change certain elements to bring in these elements, right? Like while it is important to look at, like, you can't only now look at only one type of a audience. Like with digital media, your audience is literally anybody in any part of the globe.
Yeah, I wonder if it's not just museology courses, like for architecture, right? Even designers who get involved in, say, a museum space, I think there needs to be sensitivity, signage design, graphic designers, all of
it is a see, accessibility is a universal plugin, right? Absolutely. Like it is something that works for anyone and everyone. Like
So, yeah, it's just a
Yeah.
matter of being sensitive to the topic, I think.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you, Siddhanth, for sharing, your expertise with us. And we hope, this has been helpful for museum professionals. This is available on our Facebook, and we will probably put it up on our YouTube as well for people to access. And Access for All is where Siddhanth is available. It's @Access for All, right? On Instagram.
Yeah, on Instagram @ Access for All.
Yeah. Thanks again, Siddhanth.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.